Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. This week featured two matches at home, against Bayern Munich in the first leg of our Champions League quarterfinal match, and then Aston Villa in the Premier League. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove. I realize I'm the one who drinks on here, so I'm not drinking enough for both of us. That's going to be the theme for tonight. I'm not drinking enough for both of us.
Yeah, what was the mood like in the pub this week?
It was interesting, actually. The commented, so we've struck up really well with the owner who this is the new place we started going to in January. Our last game in the old place was the FA Cup loss to Liverpool, which as we knew, but kind of it's when somebody says it's weird. It was the last time we had lost a game. At least until, I guess not sure there's the Porto one, but obviously on Sunday.
Right.
And as a guy pointed out, he obviously wasn't there for the Porto game, much like myself. And so as he pointed out, it's the first time I've ever seen Arsenal lose. It's like, yeah, I didn't want to make a joke about getting used to it because we shouldn't. But yeah, it emptied out pretty quick. It was not. I mean, partly because it was the middle. It was a 10:30 kick, so it's 12:30. Right. It's already early in the afternoon, so. People have lives to get back to at that point of the day on a Sunday. So,
yeah.
It was, the mood is, it's, I think we're bounced back in terms of our mood as a fan base, but it's going to take, the question is, well, how will the players bounce back? But we have lots of that to talk about tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, first, I alluded last week to the next phase of enticement for my son to watch soccer matches with me. And that took the form of Panini stickers. So this is something that was brought to my attention by a friend of the show, Mike, who has co-hosted a couple times. When I had mentioned to him the trading cards, the first set of trading cards that I bought my son for this purpose, they were by Panini. And he's like, oh, Panini, they make those stickers. And I was like, what? What's that? And he told me about it. So it sounded cool. And then I forgot about it for a while until I was going to buy another round of Arsenal cards because we depleted ours a couple weeks ago. And there were none. They were out of stock or whatever. So I was like, those stickers. My son loves stickers. He'd probably really be into this. So I got him the starter pack, which is a good size album. It's like maybe, a foot high. Really big album, lots of pages, and stickers to go with it. So the arrangement is for every half of a soccer match that he watches of Miami or Arsenal, either is acceptable. He'll get a pack of 5 stickers for that. So he's got. Because he watched the highlights for Bayern. He watched almost a half of the Arsenal Aston Villa match, and then he watched an entire second half of Miami's game against who are they playing? I don't remember anymore, but that was a Saturday night match. So he garnered nine stickers. So what was funny was part of the fun of the stickers is, peeling them off, which is really difficult because they cut it all the way to the edge. They don't leave you any overhang. Like when you get stickers from the DMV or something, they go out of the way to make it easy to peel off.
Right.
Panini doesn't do that. I don't know if maybe a lot of people don't peel them and just treat them like trading cards. I don't know, but it takes some serious fingernail action to try and carefully separate the layers of adhesive from backing. But we're putting him in, we're sitting down, we're doing this together. He enjoys it. It's something we're doing together. And he asked me Daddy, are there any Americans playing in the Premier League? And I said, that's a good question. There actually was one on our team. There aren't that many overall, but there are some. We had one on our team last season. He was our backup keeper. His name is Matt Turner. Now he's the number 1 for Nottingham Forest. And I'm telling him about all this. Guess what sticker was the next one to come out of the pouch as I wrap up telling him about this?
It better have been Matt Turner, otherwise the story makes no sense.
Yeah, right? It was Matt Turner. Not only was it Matt Turner, he's in his Nottingham Forest keeper kit, but it was specifically for a page of the album. This wasn't just the lineup for Nottingham Forest. This was a page where they're highlighting all the Premier League players who play for their nations. Oh. So it was highlighting him as an American on top of it. So
sometimes things just work out that way.
It was really funny. We were cracking up. So So moving into follow-up, one thing that caught my imagination, the celebration goggles that I first noticed in the Apple Vision Pro MLS Cup highlight video. I wanted to learn a little bit more about this in the history and see, like, are these commercially available products for Adidas? Are these made for that purpose, or are they just ski goggles that get repurposed or whatever? I didn't get any real definitive answers on that other than, well, searching for those terms didn't yield anything. So I don't think that they're made for that purpose, probably. But I did find an interesting article. This was from MLB.com, and it was a story that Torrey Hunter, who I'd never heard of before, but he was sharing the story, how apparently him and David Ortiz, when they played together on the Twins, this was something like they started a while back, like over 20 years ago for the Minnesota Twins baseball team. So that was interesting. They claim to have started that tradition. Celebration goggles is what everyone calls them. So next, for anyone who has listened to our episode we released Friday last week, talking about the 2011 BBC movie United. If you haven't listened, go and listen. It's an interesting movie, and I think I learned a lot about football history as well as the Manchester United club from watching that and discussing it with you, Keith. But a couple points of follow up on that. I have it from a reliable source of World War II history. Hi, Mom. That apparently the Allies made use of radio broadcasts from England to the continent as part of the war effort. So it is entirely plausible that a radio broadcast, especially over AM radio, would have made it from England to Munich, that Busby could have been listening to the results of their first match back. That could have actually happened. That isn't as implausible as you and I both thought it was.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess my question on all of that would have been just because by the time you get to the 50s, you have much more crowded airwaves.
Sure.
As opposed to during the war, when of course obviously things become a lot more restricted. But in that sense, you're right. Now that I hear that's absolutely correct. And
yeah,
you know, the way that they're broadcasting messages into Europe, both to resistance movements, but also just messages of freedom and hope to the occupied peoples of Europe. So.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, as long as there isn't a competing broadcast from a nearer station somewhere closer to Munich, that if it carries, then they would be able to listen to it. So, what I wanted to ask you about is, you mentioned something in passing. So clearly, like, before watching the movie United, I had never heard of the Munich air disaster. Like, that was something that I just never heard of before. You made mention of Liverpool's Hillsborough disaster. As I'm asking the question, I think you may have mentioned it in last season, like in the springtime for some reason I'm picturing. Can you remind me what that was?
Sure. So that came in April of 1989. I'm looking this up as you answer the question to get some of the details right here. Basically, Liverpool was at an FA Cup semi-final against Nottingham Forest, and they were played at the Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, which is a fairly old stadium, and due to a lot of poor decisions made by mostly the police and security outside the stadium, there was a crush of Liverpool fans entering the stadium. Ended up 97 people died and over 700 people were injured.
Just trampled?
Trampled. A lot of them crushed against the fence and crushed against one another. It wasn't a stampede in the sense of people running all over each other, but just a crush of people coming in. And there was fencing around, and so the spaces were very constricted, and so people, a lot of his people suffocating or being pushed into areas to the point they were able to break some of the fences and people came onto the field, which was actually one of the few ways they could relieve the pressure. They actually to bring the Arsenal connection here, they do abandon the game. Eventually, they'll replay the game, and it pushes the end of the season further and further out, such that actually Liverpool plays their final game of the season at home against Arsenal, who needed to win 2-0 to win the title. Arsenal scores in essentially the last kick of the game, Michael Thomas, and they win 2-0 and win the title at Anfield. And there's a lot of interesting bits about how that. There's a lot of interesting bits about how the impacts that has on the sport. Obviously, the Arsenal game, but even just a lot of the changes that are made in the aftermath. in terms of ticketing, in terms of procedures around fan movement, the end of the standing sections, and so the all ticket, now what they call all ticketing or all seaters, and so everyone has to have a ticket for a seat.
Right.
And so a lot of that has changed that came afterwards. And there's a lot about the way the story was presented in the media, the way the government treated it at the time and then afterwards. And again, 97 people is a lot. And so that's it was a although, I mean, we say 97, some of these are some of these are after the fact. A number of them were at the day of 94 people on the day of, and then a couple more, the 3 additional more mentioned have been as a result of their injuries afterwards, including the most recent one was someone who died in 2021. Essentially, he was diagnosed as being a persistent vegetative state for the time. There were signs of life, but eventually signs of awareness and some movement, but apparently never truly revived. And so, it's an awful thing in Liverpool between that and then another one from the early 80s, the Heysel disaster in Belgium. Liverpool's been on the end of 2 pretty awful events like that in their history. And if you look at the full crest, Liverpool's full crest, obviously they have the liver bird, but on the outside of it, you'll see 2 flames, 2 torches, and those are meant to represent Heysel and Hillsborough. So,
interesting.
So it's sort of the way, like we talked about, how United, keeps the memory of the Busby Babes and the Munich disaster alive. Same with Liverpool and the tragic parts of their history.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's nuts. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah.
So, all right. So in the news, first I'll start with a little bit of lighthearted news. I was listening to a podcast in which they interviewed Javier Milei, who was recently elected president of Argentina. And I say recently, I don't know exactly how recently. I think in the last year.
I want to say like late last year, I think.
Yeah. So this was overall an interesting interview. I learned a lot about him and his worldview. One thing that caught my attention, not only is he one of those rare people who actually comes to Judaism on his own. So I don't think he's converted yet, but he's almost there. He's reading Torah regularly and talks about converting, but he's saying it might be hard for him to keep the Sabbath as president of a country. So that's one thing that was holding him back. But even more interestingly, he was talking about, as far as, because he isn't a lifelong politician. He was an economics professor and he was in a Rolling Stones cover band and stuff. He said a ranging career, talking about what helped prepare him for running for president. He talked about his experience playing goalkeeper and how he learned the biggest thing was resistance to negative feedback, essentially, where, you've got all this pressure on the goalie. If he makes a save, to him, it's tantamount to a goal, but you don't get the credit that a striker gets for actually scoring a goal, and you get nothing but grief if you let one through. And that overall, it helped harden him to negative feedback, basically.
It reminds me I forget who it was. It was a hockey goalie who once said, "Imagine something to the effect of," and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was something to the effect of, "Imagine if every time you screwed up at your job, lights and sirens went off and thousands of people cheered." That's what it's like being a goalie.
Right. So, how's it going for Xhaka this season?
Yeah, so the fun story this weekend, it had been in the works for a couple of weeks now, but it became official on Sunday. Bayer Leverkusen officially clinched the Bundesliga title, officially ending Bayern Munich's reign of, I think, 10 straight titles, something absurd like that. So Leverkusen wins. This is especially sweet for a number of reasons. Obviously, for our old friend Granit Xhaka, who joined Leverkusen, as a transfer over the summer. First
from
season
Arsenal,
in Germany. From Arsenal, yeah. Yep. Wins a title there in Germany. I believe I don't know if it's his first title. He may have won something in Switzerland before he went to Germany and then to Arsenal. But congrats to him. And we should say Leverkusen, by the way, at this point in the season, has not lost a game in any competition.
Wow.
We're now on 40 something games where they're unbeaten, which is, I mean, even if we take as our standard Arsenal Invincibles 20 years ago, unbeaten in the league, they still lost the FA Cup. They still lost in the Champions League. They lost games in the course of the season. Leverkusen still has not lost a game.
Wow.
They still have a handful of games left in the Bundesliga. They still are in, I guess, the quarterfinals of the Europa League.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. So we're not competing against them in the Champions League. That was
they're down in the Europa League. And I believe they're up in the. I mean, especially given Liverpool lost 3-0 at home to Atalanta. You got to think Leverkusen's now on the short list of favorites to win that trophy as well. I mean, so to go entirely unbeaten, it would be insane, and especially for Leverkusen, this was Bayern Never-kusen. This was a club that I think they said had finished the most second place finishes in the Bundesliga without winning a title, and then had I think one season, I want to say it was like 2001, where they lost the Bundesliga on the final day of the season, lost the final of the German Cup, and lost the finals of the Champions League. Like, I mean, literally have never won any. I think it's the first ever major trophy they've won. So not just to win it, but to win it in the style they're doing is just outstanding. Yeah. And we can't give it all the credit to Granit Xhaka, obviously. Xabi Alonso, the manager, probably deserves most of it. But
as much as we would like to give it to him,
I think it's fair to say he's played an important role with them, and certainly as we know his strength as a locker room figure. But congrats to Leverkusen. That's it is a great story, I think, out of Germany. And obviously, if you're one of the other German clubs who was hoping to overturn Bayern, they're a little disappointed. But hey, at least it's not Bayern again. So
yeah. So I hear the Premier League is going to be making some officiation changes for next season.
Yes, the semi-automated offside is coming to England. This is apparently the same cameras and software that is used in UEFA and the Champions League. Right. So it'll look relatively familiar. So it's slightly different than what you see from FIFA and the World Cup, which is where this first debuted back in the November 22. So we're bringing it in, which I'm in favor of. I think this is definitely a good step in the right direction.
Yeah. So how is it going to work? I was seeing in the article that. And, links to everything we talk about that has a link will always be in the description for anyone who wants to follow along. It looks like they're advising the linesmen never to raise their flag for offsides, like basically wait until it's put into their earpiece, essentially, to do it.
Right. So they're waiting on, and part of the reason you do that is they do want to give the little bit of human discretion to the linesmen, because there are going to be some cases where the technology might be tripped, but the play is very clearly a non-offside situation. It's not related to what's actually happening on the field. And hopefully what this does is gets rid of some interesting incidents like we saw this Sunday. I mean, and we've seen it in every game this year where you see the referees, sometimes they'll delay on the offside, even some that look pretty clearly offside, and all of a sudden the play runs out, and then, oh, by the way, offside. Or you see it the other way where they've got a quick offside, and you think, ooh, that was really close. I don't know if you should have done that. And hopefully this takes away a lot of those, because the technology is essentially making, in a lot of ways, not entirely, but in a lot of ways, making the call for them.
I wonder, one potential side effect of this, like they talk about when we aren't all the way at like fully automated self-driving cars, right? But when we're in this in between, and this is semi-automated, right? So it's kind of in that same vein, how it's kind of dangerous when you have drivers who are accustomed to the car driving itself like 99% of the time, to the point where you really aren't paying enough attention to take corrective action in that 1% that could be disastrous for you, right? I wonder how much less linesmen are going to be paying attention to offside when, and maybe not at first, right? At first, they're going to be skeptical of it, but maybe after a year or two, when hopefully it has done its job well and they really don't need to worry about it anymore. I wonder if that's going to lead to letting bad semi-automated calls go through.
I mean, I suppose that's always possible. But I think I have to say that obviously it's a different system. I don't really recall any complaints about the offside coming during the World Cup. And I have to say I don't recall knowing now that this is what's been being used in UEFA and during the Champions League. I don't recall. I'm sure there are some, but I don't recall any sort of controversial offside calls being made or not being made in the Champions League. Now, obviously, in those cases, you're dealing with theoretically the best referees from the world or from Europe or the world in a way that, like much like the best English players get called up to the England national team, the best referees will go to the World Cup. Obviously, once you get to the league, you have a lot of guys who aren't at that level. It doesn't mean they're bad necessarily, in spite of what we say about them on some weeks. But I think that'll be part of it. And I think a lot of ways it really does come down to, in some cases, especially these linesmen right now in these early days, you're dealing with, for the most part, experienced assistant referees who essentially have spent their whole lives watching for offside. That's they almost can't not look for offside, I would imagine. But now it just becomes about the discipline to wait for the signal to make the decision for them. And there are other things the ARs do in terms of watching the game and assisting what's happening. So it's not as if they're now just, they could be replaced by robots on the side, just raising a flag or, push a buzzer goes off on the, they are involved in other parts of the game. So they can't, eliminating offside from their toolbox of things to call probably ends up being less changed than we might think.
That's true. And I also wonder if they officiate any competitions other than the Premier League, let's say, or other. I guess once you make it to that level, you probably do pretty much only officiate at the top level. But if they were to still officiate, like, in the championship or something like that, maybe if there isn't always automated offsides available, maybe they still do keep those muscles active, I guess, in their brains.
I would say I think it's a lot like the players, that you're a Premier League ref, you're a Premier League ref, and they will officiate maybe not international, the best one's international competition or continental competition, but you're not going, like, guys aren't just suddenly dropping down and showing up at Sunderland for a championship game. They're not doing that. But there are some instances of they'll go abroad and for like random games. There's a infamous moment earlier this season when a couple referees went to the Middle East somewhere and refereed something, and then came back and did a Manchester City game, and because of the ownership and they made some not curious calls in the sense of but more like the kind of missed calls that you would make sense if you were tired, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, why would you be going in the middle of the week to go referee another game, which is they run the whole game, and they do the physical exertion too. So, and plus the travel and the jet lag. So who knows? But for the most part, if you're a Premier League ref, you're not going to suddenly show up, in Wrexham. Who also won promotion this weekend. We should also throw in.
Ah, cool. No, that seems early to clinch that. Wow.
They are doing quite well in League Two, which isn't a surprise. They're a very well financed club, certainly for League Two.
Right.
We'll see how that changes as they move into League One, and then going forward. But again, they're well backed. They have a lot of exposure. They've drawn a lot in terms of investment in advertising, and of course being backed by two very famous people. One very famous person and Rob McElhenney. I kid a bit. I enjoy It's Always Sunny. He's obviously a good actor, but his compatriot is Ryan Reynolds, who is quite literally world famous.
Well, yeah. I know him from Mythic Quest, which is a show on Apple TV Plus that I'm a big fan of. So before we leave this topic, one thing, you use the term ARs. Is that used generally to refer to like the second, third, and fourth officials as a group? Is that something people say, or
sometimes? So it's the assistant referees are the two, or sometimes the linesmen, the two on the sides. Then the fourth official is the fourth official, the guy who's standing, who's there and does the board for the subs and for the extra time. He does other things too. Usually he's there for the coaches to yell at during the course of the game. And then the referee or the head referee, of course, making the calls on the field.
Yeah. But okay, so ARs does refer to all three of those as a group aside from the main.
No, we'd only refer to the linesmen or the
I gotcha.
The fourth official is the fourth official.
Linesmen or assistant referees.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
At least that's how I've used it. So I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's okay. That's okay.
Okay. So let's dip our toes into the Bayern Munich game. So this was the first leg of our quarterfinal match. It happened just after we recorded last week on April 9th. The final score was a draw at 2-2. We were the first and last to score in this match. We had a lead. We ceded it in the first half and managed to barely claw parity back at the very end. So it was an interesting one to watch.
This is probably, I guess, in terms of just the point that we're at in the season and the stakes of the game and the quality of the opposition, is probably about as premier a game as you've seen. Maybe we could say the game at City this year, but even then, that was just already 2 weeks later, quarterfinals of the champion. I mean, this is, of course, this is what the Champions League is for, is games like this. And so I'll sort of ask this to you. So I was not able to watch any of the game live. I have seen highlights of some of the more critical moments, we'll say, which we can talk about. But I guess just first your overall, especially given, we had sort of forgotten this, Bayern had no fans there. They were banned from that. So that whole stadium was Arsenal people. I'm sure there were a few Bayern people scattered throughout, but yeah, there was no away section. That was all Arsenal fans. And even just watching the highlights and then hearing some commentary from people there, it was, what an atmosphere.
That amused my son a lot that the fans of Bayern were in trouble. He's very familiar with getting in trouble and punishments and
getting a timeout.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so no, it was you could tell that we were prepared for the match. We went in really strong. We never gave up. We held on the whole time. It was definitely a case where the impact players really made the impact that they were intended to. The goal that equalized things was 2 late substitutions that both worked together, Jesus and Trossard, to score the tying goal. It was also interesting. So you and I both voted Raya as the player of the match in our last Champions League match. Like, it's basically because of him that we got here. You could very easily make the case that he's the reason we didn't win this match. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll get in mind, this is mostly based on the highlights and commentary. I mean, certainly on the first goal that we concede, he probably wants that back, but I suspect he is the last in a line of players who probably should be blamed for that. A lot of nervous exchanges, sloppy exchanges, passing, and
bad
turnover.
Let me ask you, in the highlights that you watched, how far back before that goal did they show?
Not too. So I saw Arsenal's, the clubs, which picked up pretty much when Bayern already had possession. Now I know there's some, obviously Raya was involved in some of the poor passing that led to the turnover.
So here's the thing. He was further off his line than I remember seeing in a long time. Like, he was near the midfield mark when the ball was like crossing the midfield line. Like, there's no way he should have been that far forward at that point in time. And that caught Saliba off guard. And so Saliba kind of tried getting the ball to him, but he wasn't far enough back for that to really work. And I seeing the whole thing unfold. I really Raya needed to do something differently. I don't know, because of the nature of the way that the camera moves when you're watching a televised match, we don't see what exactly caused him to position himself that way, but he needed to get back sooner than he did ultimately.
I mean, I'm willing to concede that. Again, we know Raya is going to push up farther forward, partly because that's what Arteta wants him to do. Was he as far forward as farther than he should have been? I'm not going to. Yeah,
either farther forward or staying there too late. It's some combination of those two things. He should have been retreating quicker when he saw the ball was moving in that direction. And there were defenders there. It's not like he was the only one there and he was going to be the one who was going to get it back onto the opponent's side or something, Yeah. So, that's how it appeared to me.
I mean, that's fair. And I think that one's certainly more the case. The other one, I mean, the penalty, I mean, it's annoying because this is not the first time we've seen it, but Harry Kane's really good at taking penalties, especially against us. I can't fault. I rarely will fault a keeper for failing on a penalty shot, as we've talked about. It's such an advantage to the shooter, but also, so he goes the wrong way. Kane's one of the best at it, and so
what I noticed, it's kind of funny to me watching the way he reacted to that, is you could tell watching it in real time, like he realized almost immediately that he went the right way in a way that I haven't seen keepers do on a penalty kick very often. Mm-hmm. Like usually they pick a direction, they commit, they leap with everything they've got. He aborted his dive like almost immediately and landed on his knees. Like he's like, shoot.
Sometimes But again, a penalty comes off of, as I've seen some bad giveaways as well. And we were, as far as I can tell, we started out very brightly, started out very well, and leads to Bukayo Saka scoring an excellent goal because he's an excellent player.
Yeah.
He really is a Champions League player in a lot of ways. And that goal, that is a fantastic goal. And from the sound of it, we were sort of imperious. And then just a few minutes later, Ben White. It's hard to fault Ben White for shooting into the keeper when he's not a striker. He's a defender.
Right.
It's hard to fault him too much, but a lot of the sort of reaction is that's the sliding doors moment, the moment where it could have at 2-0 up. This is a very different game, and all of a sudden Bayern gets themselves back in, our own nerves, and it's not just our nerves. Again, Bayern is not Bayern anymore, but they're still Bayern. And that makes sense.
Boy, was that ever a commentary made for a podcast?
Yeah, they're still absurdly talented all over the field. They're not the team that's won the Bundesliga the last 10 years in a row, but they're still really good. They're still very much a pretty good chance to win this competition, the Champions League. I would not be surprised if they were to beat either City or Real in the next round. I would also not be surprised if we went and beat them in Munich on Wednesday. But like they're very good, and they punish. Again, we talked about the Porto game. Mistakes get punished in these competitions and this kind of opponents in the way that they just don't against so much of our league competition. Even taking into account, obviously, what we saw. We'll talk about Aston Villa a little bit later, but even taking that into account, the degree to which our mistakes will be punished. Is something I think we still, as a club, as players, need to adjust to and be smarter about. Because we saw that for years. The teams that finished in eighth are the teams that were struggling to sort of qualify for the Champions League in those, sort of around those 8th place years. They play well and then make a stupid mistake, and it was in the back of the net and it was 1-0. And that's something that you saw a little bit here in this one.
Yeah. So the first, minor controversy that occurred to me with this match. So the first half is nearly over, and they announce 1 minute of stoppage time after there were 3 goals scored across both teams, one of which was a penalty kick. There is no way it was only 1 minute of stoppage time. That was nuts to me. Is UEFA using any kind of like automated stoppage time calculation like we talked about in the World Cup or anything? It doesn't seem like they could be.
Clearly not. Again, welcome to the world of stoppage time, where there seems to be no rhyme or reason as to why there's how many minutes there are. Why? But I honestly, obviously, without watching, I can't say. But yeah, I have no. That doesn't make any sense to me. Just sitting here thinking about it, but
yeah,
shrug. I don't know.
Right. So we battled hard. We kept on going for it the whole second half. It finally culminates in Trossard, doing what he does. Beautiful shot. You could tell they were ecstatic that they drew even, which at that point in the match was all we could really realistically hope for. But yeah, it was really exciting. The other major controversy I wanted to talk to you about is, so now we're 5 minutes into stoppage time in the second half, which I don't know, maybe they took some minutes from the first half and put it on the end of the second half. I don't know.
Which wouldn't be the first time that has happened either.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The penalty non-call on Saka. How do you feel about that? Like, did you see it like in a slow motion enough replay to analyze your thoughts on it?
So, yeah, I mean, the replays, the highlight package will show both of it. So, my general sense is I can sort of see why it wasn't called live. And once you go to the replay, there the standard is and should be clear and obvious error. And if the call on the field is no penalty, I can easily see how you watch that replay and say to yourself, yeah, it's not clear cut that was the wrong decision. Now, having said that, I think Neuer, the Bayern keeper, I think he's a very lucky boy. I think that is a very. I mean, he's a desperate play. Obviously, made late in the game against a dangerous attacker. I think Neuer is lucky that didn't get called that way. It's frustrating, of course, because obviously to have a penalty that late and Saka, the way he was playing, I would back him thoroughly to score and we win 3-2. I don't want to get too worked up about it in the sense that I get it. Like I can sort of see how the sequence of decisions took place. And again, not watching it live. Obviously, I watched it live. I would have much more colorful things to say, I'm sure. It's only after the fact and having read some other commentary and seeing some replays and, doing it all with the hindsight of what did happen. I can sort of justify in my mind how that all took place.
Right.
I'm curious. I don't know. I know you're not much of a post-game watcher, like post-game commentary from managers or things like that. I know you're not really.
Yeah, not usually.
So there was a play earlier in the game which the Thomas Tuchel in particular was irate about post-game to a degree that was, well, frankly, silly. But the ball, Raya sets up the ball for a goal kick or a free kick on the 6-yard box, kicks it to Gabriel, who then picks it up with his hands, puts it down on the ground, and then takes the kick. And the Bayern people were outraged that wasn't called a handball in the box instead of for a penalty. Now, I guess what I'd say, I don't know, is this play ringing any bells to you? Did this?
Yeah, now that you mention it, I do remember it. I didn't really, it didn't make a strong impression on me at the time. It was a little bit weird, but when nothing was called, I just figured, oh, okay, yeah, I guess he gave him the ball so that he could take the kick. I mean, how else could you look at that? Like, he's not like a 6-year-old. Like, he knows if he's picking up the ball, it's because he's supposed to in that moment. Like, he's not forgetting that he can't use his hands, So he had just passed him to have him take the kick, I guess. I don't know why. But so what you're saying is they were irate because once he kicks it, it's on the ground, he kicks it. That is the goal kick. It is a live ball at that point.
And there is a whistle that blows before, which presumably sort of signals that the play is on. And this was the comment, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because I don't remember the exact wording, but apparently the comment from the referee to Bayern was basically, no, I'm not giving that.
Yeah.
They sort of in the sense of, I guess technically by the letter of the law, yes, but I mean, no one thinks that's a penalty. Shut up. Like, I'm sorry. Like, shut up, Bayern. Now we're going to reach back into the past of my Arsenal fandom when we were unceremoniously eliminated. One of the times we were eliminated by Barcelona. We received a second leg in the new camp in Barcelona, received a red card, a second yellow and a red card because Robin van Persie was called for offside, boots the ball into the stands. Now, what he's doing is he's shooting at the net. He just misses. But because the whistle had already blown for offside, technically that was time wasting. And so he was given the yellow for that. Now, the whistle blows in a stadium of 90,000 people screaming. The idea he didn't hear the whistle is perfectly rational. Right. But of course, it's at Barcelona. So, he has to give the yellow. Yes, I'm still extraordinarily bitter about this. I have other extremely colorful things I can tell Bayern to go do with their complaints.
Right.
I'll just say Thomas Tuchel is a man who knows this is the only competition he has a chance at winning before he gets considered a failure. He's already on his way out. He will leave Bayern at the end of the season. And
Yeah.
Stop it! Don't stop embarrassing yourself. There's something childish about this, and it's not Gabrielle. So that's all I'm going to say about that. That's all.
Well, yeah. So knowing from that point of view, like, should that have been a penalty? Which, right? I guess if he called it a foul and it was in their own box, right? Clearly, the reason to call a penalty is because you did something that stopped the other team from taking advantage of a position near the goal to score. So you give them a very clear way to easily score in compensation, right? Which that wasn't the case. Like, that's even if they had a player, like, I don't remember, were there Bayern players in the box at that time? I can picture what happened with Saliba and Raya, but were there Bayern players like pressuring them at that point when that happened?
No, they were okay. Fully away. There's zero advantage gain to zero advantage gain to Arsenal in that. Like, nobody's really paying attention. There's no pressure being put on them. I mean, the players who recognize, I think it was Mueller and Kane are there. Like, they're still raising their hands, but yeah, they're like closer to the midfield circle than they are to the 18-yard box.
Yeah. So, yeah, I do not disagree with him on that non-call because, like I said, at the time, it's like, oh, okay. And if that had been the other team, I probably would have had much the same reaction, like, oh, okay.
Right, yeah, it's the kind of thing like you wouldn't think about, and then, all of a sudden they're, again, complaining about it for like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
So there is some interesting stuff to come out of there, though. Kingsley Coman, one of Bayern's forwards, is actually apparently was hurt in their game on Saturday, and so he will be out for the return leg. And then Serge Gnabry, who scored their first goal, former Arsenal player Gnabry, is also, I believe, going to be out as a result of a yellow card that he picks up. But apparently he's also dealing with an injury as well. So it'll be interesting. Again, the sort of the notion of the two-leg tie and how these things kind of play out in the second leg. It will be, I mean, there's still everything to play for us. Again, there are no away goals. In a world of away goals, losing, 2-2 draw at home is a bad result. Like, you know, 2 goals at home, but there are no away goals. So, in a sense, it's simple. You just win outright in Germany. Totally. That's all you have to do. Just win outright in Bayern.
Yeah, even on penalties if it comes down to it. Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, but that's the other thing, too, is we'll talk about as we get to Villa. You start adding in the time. I mean, again, like with Porto, right? We played, 90 minutes the first leg and then 120 minutes the second leg, plus the penalties. Only this time after Bayern, we still have a game Saturday. Like with the Porto game, we had some time, and we're seeing a little bit of the effects of that, I think, when we deal with Villa. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But, again, it's frustrating in the sense because that we, once again, in a Champions League or a European game, we didn't play particularly well. And that's the conversation they're getting out, is that there is another level we have. Frustrating you can't get it home, and I don't know that you're going to find that second level away from home. So we've had some struggles away from home in the Champions League, and that's before going into, again, a very difficult environment against a very good team. But, again, all we have to do, right, in quotes, all we have to do is win. It's not even like with the Porto game. We had to win because we were losing. I mean, we have to draw and push it to penalties, which I'd rather not do again. But all we have to do is win a game, and then we're on to the next round. And so we still have everything to play for in the Champions League, and they need to keep their heads on for what happened here, but also based on what happened in the Villa match as well, which I know we'll get to shortly.
Yeah, so if you're ready to move on from Bayern, so today was the beginning of our spring sports season in this household. So we had our first baseball practice. Tomorrow will be our first soccer practice. So spring sports are in full effect. And as longtime listeners will note, I am looking forward to getting the Liquid IV benefit from my post practice post game regimen. So of course, Liquid IV is the category winning hydration brand fueling your well being, and their hydration multiplier is the one product you're missing in your daily routine. In just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than with water alone. Use it first thing in the morning, before a workout, when you feel run down, after a long night out, and on long flights. There are 12 delicious, refreshing flavors to keep your hydration routine exciting, and it is made with non-GMO ingredients that are free from gluten, dairy, and soy. I love the convenience of it. I love that it tastes good with no aftertaste. My favorite flavor so far, as of this recording, is strawberry lemonade. Maybe by this time next week, I will have a different feeling on it. We'll see if I get to try one of the new ones. So if that sounds good to you, you can get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code Gooner at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Gooner at liquidiv.com. As always, there's a link in our show notes or description to make it easier for you. So Villa. Yeah. Sigh from both of us.
And the day was starting really well. I assume you obviously heard about this after the fact. Before I left to go to the game, I saw most of and then saw the score at the end in the car on the way in. Liverpool lost at home to Crystal Palace.
Yeah, it's funny. So I went back to the full match replay later on in the day after having watched it live, and I think something had happened with the match when I was watching it live. Like I ended up, the app crashed, and then like I had to watch an ad again to get back into the game, so I was like 20 seconds delayed or something. But yeah, so I didn't hear them say that at the beginning of the match, even though they did. I did notice midway through the match when they showed the live table, I was like, wait. We're down or we're tied or whatever at that time, and we're still even with Liverpool? Oh, they must have lost today.
1-0 at home to Aston Villa, which is
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, which is, I mean, look, obviously it's frustrating to lose to Villa. Villa is in fourth place. They're really quite solid. Crystal Palace is not. That's a bad loss for Liverpool. But again, it started so well. I mean, this was a chance, not to bury Liverpool, but certainly would have given ourselves a pretty good cushion against them at the very least. And with City having hammered Luton, which is an unsurprising result, but City having hammered Luton, on Saturday would have been good too. And for most of the first half, it felt like we were knocking on that door.
Yeah.
We were right there for so much of the first half. But, like that stretch right after Christmas, we just couldn't find the goal.
Yeah, so that's one thing that was really interesting about this match is there were a lot of so close attempts from both teams, and I think even more from Villa. Like we had a couple that went wide and like didn't even touch the pole. They had 2 goals that nicked the inside edge of the crossbar and or the post, depending on which goal you're talking about, and it didn't go in. Like that first one where that happened should have been a wake-up call to them, like, we better get back in this and pay better attention or something.
Well, we in the first half, though, I don't think you can say that, because I think in some ways that was how Villa was playing the game. They were sitting back, absorbing pressure, and then breaking on the counter. Now, of course, they're breaking on the counter with Ollie Watkins, who's one of the league's leading scorers, and so he's the guy you want to see with the ball in his foot. In a sense, you could sort of say to yourself, okay, that's the bullet dodge. That was the chance they created off the counter. Yeah. He hits the post twice. It was a heart in the throat moment, wasn't it?
Yeah. That first one wasn't when it hit twice. That first one hit the inside edge, and it started spinning, and it spun toward the goal line, but managed to just clear the post before it went out over the byline, which was just crazy. I don't remember ever seeing that happen that way. It's improbable.
It made its way. If you're Watkins, you're thinking, what do I have to do? But it just doesn't make it in. And, but overall, we didn't necessarily, we had a couple shots that floated wide. We had a lot of really dangerous balls going through the 6-yard box that we just didn't have somebody get on the end of. Havertz had a couple of plays. Again, they were very reminiscent of early in the season where he was getting in position and getting the ball, but maybe takes one touch too many or sort of gets dribbled into a wrong angle or defended into a tight angle. Villa's a very good defensive team. I think they said they've generated more offside calls against their opponents than anyone else in the league this season.
Oh, interesting.
They're very solid. They're very They got a few against us. Very solid defensive team. And
that's an interesting stat I haven't heard before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they just, because you saw it a lot, especially when the ball was in midfield. Villa was playing a very high line defensively. I mean, a lot of times it wasn't. We had the ball in their end of the field, and so, of course, everybody's sitting back. But once the ball went into our end, they were very high, and it prevents a lot of the counters. You would see a few times, once or twice I saw it, guys were clearly trying to break, but because we didn't see the pass immediately, they had to pause, and they're still right around the halfway line, which is very, difficult place to be in. Credit to them for defending well, but overall we were creating dangerous chances, and it's frustrating. Of course, we couldn't get one in. I felt pretty good at the half.
Me too.
This was. I mean, this is what it was always going to be like against Villa. As we said, they were in fourth place. They're a very good team, very solid defensively. They're smart. They've got some good players, although we're missing a couple of good players too. Is it Douglas Luiz, who's their midfielder, who's a summer target for a number of big clubs, including possibly us. But they still have Ollie Watkins. They still have some quality players. There's some quality players on the bench too. And Unai Emery, who in spite of his experience at Arsenal, is still a quality manager. And up until the half, things I thought were generally going well, and then we come out for the second half, and by their own admission, Villa didn't do anything differently. We just didn't play as well, and I can't say, again, deserves got nothing to do with it, but I can't really say the ultimate result was undeserved.
No, and especially with those near attempts they had, you could almost have seen it getting even worse than this at some point potentially.
Yeah, they had that. Yeah, off the crossbar. Was it Tielemans who hit that one? I forget. It wasn't.
Yeah,
Watkins,
I don't remember.
Again.
I think it was probably Watkins. Yeah, I don't remember.
Again, it's one of those those chances came in a moment when Villa was controlling possession, more dominant on the ball, stronger on the ball, really pushing forward, and ultimately their corner, their goal came after their third corner in succession. You're putting yourself in a dangerous situation when that sort of thing happens, and I think a couple guys switched off, and there was Leon Bailey, Jamaican international, CONCACAF legend Leon Bailey, who was the one who got on the end of it, and that was tough. It was real tough.
Yeah, well, and it's especially painful, with our corner kick record getting scored on in such a match, from corner kicks, basically. It was the aftermath of the corner kick that caused it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the build up to the next goal was just another comedy of errors on our part, where it's Saka cleared it, then Zinchenko got it, but then he tried passing to Jorginho, who was just not there or something, he wasn't looking or something. I forget what it was, but it was just one of these things where it's a careless giveaway that led to them ratcheting it up almost immediately after to an insurmountable lead,
Yeah, and credits there on Watkins. A little credit to Emil Smith Rowe for chasing him down, but not really
almost,
being able to. Yeah, I mean, credit for him to making the track back, but I mean, again, a good goal scorer, chips the keeper. I don't know, could Raya have done better with that? Maybe. But you're kind of putting yourself in that position. I mean, I know we're worried about goal difference, and 2-0 is definitely a lot worse than 1-0, but that sort of feels like the kind of goal, if you watch hockey late in the game when you're trailing, you have the empty net, you pull the goalie to give you an extra skater, and plenty of times that ends up with the other team scoring an easy goal into the empty net.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those it feels bad when it happens, but it's you already felt bad. It doesn't make you feel that it sort of looks worse, but it isn't really any worse in practice. I mean, I guess technically, one play we could have gotten the goal. We still had there still was time. Or 5 minutes. It ended up being about 5 minutes of extra time, but we couldn't break through. And I don't know. I in terms of our overall, obviously we made a lot of changes from the Champions League lineup. We saw a little bit more rotation. I think some of our substitutes were driven by Champions League considerations. Jorginho,
okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if he plays. Apparently, Odegaard said he felt something when he came off.
Oh,
which would be terrifying if it really is hurt, and that would be awful. I've said nice things about Eddie Nketiah. He didn't really do a whole lot when he was on the field. Zinchenko is always. I think Zinchenko is getting a little bit too much flack for this game. I mean, we know about his defensive deficiencies. He does a lot for us offensively, but this is a game where some of those deficiencies kind of haunted us. Some of his errors were part of what led to some of the goals, especially the second one. And, he gets beaten a couple other occasions that maybe they don't lead to a goal, but you think about the corners, right? It allows them to recycle possession and try again. Sort of like where we were in those games we were winning 4 or 5-6-0. We get a quick turnover on the press, and all of a sudden we're allowed to recycle. And maybe that didn't result in a goal, but we keep up the pressure, and eventually they do crack. And in this case, it was us that cracked. So
yeah. Yeah, but like you said, it's like the second half. I don't know what happened to us. We just fell asleep at the wheel or something. We just lacked the skill and intensity that we brought to the first half. It just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So
no, I just again Villa wasn't doing anything differently. They were just, and I think some of it was confidence. A team like that, they didn't give up a goal in the first 15, 20 minutes. They didn't give up a goal in the first half. It allows them to grow into the game. Sort of like we talked a little bit about. We'll probably see a little bit as well with. At Bayern, I would not be surprised if they come out, full of fire, and we have to kind of weather the storm. But we talked about the city game a couple of weeks ago, right? How they came out very strong at the start. We kind of had to weather the storm for about 20 minutes before we were really able to generate some possession and opportunities. And I think that's sort of how Villa handled this one. They weathered the storm, were able to come back, able to push forward, and we wind up. Eventually, 84th minute. That's the thing. It was so late in the game that's the gut punch to it. That it feels like, really to give it. Did we have time to come back? Yes, but man, it just that late really just sticks it to you.
Yeah, no, it does. Well, on that cheery note, you want to talk about a player of the week?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll. I have some broader post-game commentary, but we'll save that for the up next. What I will say, player of the week, I am still going to say out of both of these games, I'm going to say Martin Odegaard. I thought he was, he's still such a key player for us. I thought he was fantastic in the first half. So, I'm going to say Odegaard as our guy for the player of the week. I mean, Saka was really good in the Bayern game. I don't know he was quite as noted. He did a lot of good things in this one, but I think I'm going to say Odegaard, who was excellent for much of the games he played, and I just hope he's whatever he felt. I mean, again, everybody's hurt this time of year, but let's hope whatever it is does not keep him out of the game in Munich.
Right. Agreed. I do believe Odegaard would be my choice overall for the same reasons you mentioned. Like the first half, he was doing so well in this match. It's also, the Bayern match is largely faded from memory, like the intricate details about who played well. I seem to remember Jesus had a pretty strong appearance. Like he was a major contributor to the ultimately not the worst result, the moderate result that we achieved against Bayern. But I'd give it to Odegaard too for the same reason. Just good command of the ball, some really skillful handling that I was noticing throughout. That was just nice to watch. So yeah, hopefully he's doing well. So what is up for next week?
So next week, big one, Wednesday, Champions League at Bayern. That's Paramount Plus. Again, as we talked about, you just have to win in Germany. That's all. Just go to the Allianz, one of the toughest places in Europe to play and win. Or maybe draw and win on penalties. I don't know. But I think Arsenal at their best can compete there. I think we've done very well on away games in the league. We haven't done as well in away games in Europe. So hopefully there's that extra gear that we have lacked we can find.
Right.
I see we're both wearing our European kits this week. I have heard suggestions that they may consider wearing the yellows instead of the greens. So they've played very well in the yellow kits this season. No idea if that's really true. I haven't heard anything. We'll probably start seeing stuff. You notice a little bit as they build up to the game on the website. The graphics they start using will basically lead towards the color. So we'll probably know something tomorrow when we start to hear about. Or if nothing else, by Wednesday morning our time, you'll start to see stuff with the graphics on it. But
Yeah,
We'll see
I know.
at the end
I go by the email that I get on match day. They always
Yeah.
send out their preview, and that's always themed to the jerseys they'll be wearing. So yeah,
Exactly, which I appreciate. But anyway, yeah. So we have Bayern, still a lot to play for. That tie is still very much in the air. Bayern will certainly feel. He certainly knows that they have all to fight for as well. So a lot there. And then back to the Premier League on Saturday. We're at Wolves. Probably one of the. I want to be very careful about how they say this, but one of the easier fixtures we have. This is, by the way, noting that we still have at United, at Spurs, we still have Chelsea. Like, we still have some potentially difficult games left. So at Wolves, which is not easy. Wolves is a tough defensive team. They're not very dangerous offensively, but a tough defensive team. We have to go on the road. Obviously, with the midweek game, it's a short turnaround, Wednesday to Saturday. Wolves, to my knowledge, is not playing a midweek game, so they'll be rested and ready for us. So it should be a difficult game. But I'll say this: as we look forward, I think it feels worse than it really is, because right now we have 6 games left.
This was our 32nd, so yeah.
Yeah, 6 to go. Yes, City is in front by 2 points. With City, it does always feel like they'll just win out and win these, and maybe they will. A 6-game winning streak is not the craziest thing in the world, especially for them. But I think from Arsenal's perspective, I think we can make them do it. You want to be in a position where you win your games and make City do that. Make it take 6 straight wins to close out the season, and also all it takes is one draw. It takes one draw from City,
right, and
we're level with them again. If we keep winning, of course. Obviously, if we start dropping more points, we're really, then it's pretty much, it's not over, but it's pretty much over.
Yeah.
But one draw, and we're level with them. I know with the way City plays, I know we've talked about them as the monster in the background. With all they have, and the City is inevitable. But this City is not. This year's version is maybe not. And maybe they will be. Maybe they do win 6 in a row. Maybe they finish it with the win, or 9 in a row, whatever it would be at that point. They certainly could do it. But I think mentally we have to do the thing that we couldn't do last year. And the thing that we've largely avoided this year is letting bad results compound themselves. We saw that right when the season. It was even a little bit earlier this year, the last season, right? But we have to be in a place when results go bad that we do not let them compound themselves. Do not let the Villa loss turn into a loss to Bayern or turn into a loss to Wolves. Get yourself back on the horse, which we've done fairly well this season. Yeah, we had that little bobble there after the holidays, but we found our shooting boots, and we went on a run. This is our our first loss in the league since the start of the new year. It is not over yet, or at the very least, let us not. I know it feels that way, but if City has to be perfect the rest of the way, then let's make them be perfect the rest of the way. If they do it, fine. What else can you say? What else can you do? But let's not beat ourselves on this. Let's make them beat us, which they haven't done this year.
Yeah.
Let's point out, win and 2 draws. They haven't actually beaten us head to head this year. So yeah,
right.
Keep your heads on. Beat Bayern, beat Wolves. In the mid-90s, the Yankees, in one of their stretches, one of their players, how do you approach the game? So we play today, we win today. That's it. That's how it has to be. Play today, you win today. That's it.
Yeah. Well said. Your accent, it sounds like that might have been Ortiz.
No. Ortiz played for the Red Sox, so no.
No. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking it was the Yankees. Yeah, whoops.
No, I want to say was it Mariano Duncan, maybe? I don't know. Anyway,
okay.
we're talking almost 30 years ago, so.
Okay. And yeah, so Wolves will be on USA, and Bayern, as always, on Paramount Plus. All right, well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes to take you there. Wherever you watch or listen, join other smart and considerate listeners like yourself, and subscribe, rate, or review, or share the show. Thanks again to our sponsor, Liquid IV. And you can find us on Twitter to get updates and ask questions. Check out our description for links for everything we talk about, including our sponsors and our Twitter pages. Again, my name is Dove. You can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
Come on, Arsenal.